My name is Eliza. I'm 34 years old. And I used to believe that I understood my husband, Leo, better than he understood himself. You know that feeling? When you've studied someone so closely that their rhythms become your own. The precise way he'd fold the newspaper in half, never in quarters. The low hum in his throat right before he was about to disagree with something. The way he needed exactly 2 minutes after walking through the door to decompress before you could ask him about his day. I wasn't just his wife. I was his curator. His world was a gallery, and I was the one who arranged the exhibits, who made sure the lighting was just right. Our life in our small Chicago brownstone wasn't just a life, it was a masterpiece we had built together. Or rather, a masterpiece I had meticulously overseen. Leo was a senior curator at the Art Institute. A prestigious job that sounded more exciting than it was. Mostly, it was paperwork and placating wealthy donors. But he loved the quiet dignity of it, the hushed halls and the weight of history. I was a freelance graphic designer, working from a sun-drenched studio on our top floor. It was a perfect dynamic. He brought the old world, I brought the new. We were balanced. Our mornings were a sacred ritual. The hiss of the espresso machine, the clink of ceramic on marble as I set out his favorite mug. He'd read the paper while I sketched out ideas, the only sounds being the rustle of newsprint and the scratch of my pencil. We had an entire language built on silence and inside jokes. A glance across a crowded room was enough to communicate a novel's worth of disdain for someone's gaudy shoes. It was comfortable. It was safe. It was mine. The first time he mentioned her name, it was nothing. A speck of dust on a flawless painting. We're bringing in a specialist for the new Degas exhibit, he said one evening, swirling the wine in his glass. Claire Devereaux. She's a leading historian on French Impressionism. I remember picking a piece of lint off my sweater. Sounds academic. She is, he said, and his eyes had a spark I hadn't seen in a while. A work spark, I told myself, incredibly sharp. Wrote the book on his sculptural work, literally. She's coming over from the Musée d'Orsay for a few months. French, I said, and the word tasted like cheap perfume. How chic. He didn't catch the sarcasm. Or he chose to ignore it. He just nodded, a small, genuine smile on his face. She really knows her stuff. It's refreshing. Refreshing. The word just hung there in the air between us. As if what we had, what I provided, was stale. I dismissed it, of course. Leo was passionate about his work. This was just a new project, a new puzzle to solve. Claire Devereaux was probably some 50-year-old academic with tweed jackets and a sensible, joyless haircut. A work function, nothing more. I told myself that night, as I lay in bed listening to the steady rhythm of his breathing, that our foundation was unshakable. He was my Leo, and no one, especially not some dusty French historian, could ever change that. I was so sure. So beautifully, tragically sure. The first cracks in the foundation are never the big, dramatic quakes. They're hairline fractures, tiny, almost invisible fissures that you can ignore if you try hard enough. And I tried. It started with the texts. Our constant stream of consciousness throughout the day, a funny headline, a complaint about a client, a simple thinking of you slowed to a trickle. When I'd ask, he'd have a ready answer. Sorry, got pulled into a planning meeting with Claire. Just got out of the archives. Claire found an inconsistency in the provenance records. Claire. 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 Her name became a constant, dull hum in the background of our lives. Then he started coming home late. Not every night, but enough. The easy excuse was the exhibit. The deadlines were tight, he'd say, and Claire was a perfectionist. I'd have dinner waiting, slowly growing cold on the stove. He'd walk in, apologizing, his hair slightly disheveled, smelling of old paper and the museum's sterile air. And something else? One night, he leaned in to kiss me, and it was there. A faint, unfamiliar scent. Not his usual crisp citrus. This was something warmer, subtler, sandalwood, and something faintly floral. It wasn't perfume. It was lotion, maybe. The kind a woman would use. A French woman, perhaps. I didn't say anything. I just filed it away, another piece of evidence in a case I was building without even admitting it to myself. The breaking point, the moment the hairline fracture split wide open, was at a donors gala at the museum. It was one of those stuffy, black tie affairs I despised but endured for his career. I spent 2 hours getting ready, choosing a deep emerald gown that brought out the green in my eyes and made me feel like a queen in her court. Tonight, I thought, I would remind him who he belonged to. We were making the rounds, him talking about restoration techniques, me smiling politely, when he suddenly stiffened. "Oh, there's Claire. I have to introduce you." I followed his gaze. And there she was. She was not 50. She was not wearing tweed. She was probably my age, maybe a few years older, with dark, intelligent eyes and hair pulled back in a simple, elegant knot. She was wearing a black dress. It wasn't flashy or revealing, it was just perfect. It radiated a quiet confidence that I immediately, instinctively hated. Leo's entire posture changed as we approached her. He stood straighter. The tired slump from his shoulders was gone. He looked energized. He looked happy. "Claire," he said, his voice warmer than it had been all night. "This is my wife, Eliza." She turned, and her smile was polite, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. She extended a hand. "A pleasure to finally meet you. Leo has told me so much about you." Avidus. The words were right, but they felt like a lie. A carefully crafted line designed to disarm me. I took her hand. It was cool and smooth. "Likewise," I said, my voice tight. "I've heard absolutely everything about the Degas exhibit." Leo launched into an animated story about a recent discovery they'd made, something about a preliminary sketch found under the frame of a painting. He and Claire finished each other's sentences, their rapport easy and practiced. They shared a small laugh over some shared frustration with the museum's bureaucracy. I just stood there, invisible. A beautifully dressed accessory. I tried to insert myself, to reclaim my territory. "It must be so thrilling," I said, my tone just a little too bright. "Digging through all that old, dusty stuff." Claire's smile faltered for a second. She looked at me, really looked at me, and I saw a flicker of something in her eyes. Pity? Annoyance? I couldn't tell. "History is never dusty to me," she said, her voice even. "It's alive." Leo, completely oblivious, just beamed at her. "That's what I always say." I felt a cold, hard knot form in my stomach. He had never said that. Not to me. I spent the rest of the evening watching them from across the room. The way he'd lean in to hear her over the chatter. The way she'd touch his arm lightly to emphasize a point. They weren't flirting. It was worse than that. They were connecting, on a level I suddenly realized I couldn't compete with. The intellectual plane. The one place I had always conceded to him. That night, as we drove home in silence, I knew. The illusion of my perfect, curated world was beginning to crumble, and I was terrified. The dam of my denial broke on a Tuesday. It was a stupid thing, really. He was in the shower, and his phone, left on the nightstand, buzzed. It was a habit, a reflex. For years, we'd had no secrets. I could pick up his phone, he could pick up mine. It meant nothing, until it meant everything. I picked it up, a message from Claire. "Thinking about our conversation earlier, you were right about the placement of Little Dancer. See you tomorrow." It was innocent, it was professional, and it sent a jolt of pure, white-hot rage through me. Thinking about our conversation earlier. What conversation? The ones they had after hours, when he was supposed to be on his way home to me? I scrolled, and I scrolled. There were dozens of them, hundreds, maybe, stretching back weeks. Most were about work, catalog proofs, lighting fixtures, historical context, but woven in between were other things. A link to an article, a recommendation for a coffee shop near the museum, a comment about a rainy day. It wasn't a love affair, it was a friendship, a burgeoning, intimate friendship that I had no part in. He was building a new world, a new connection, and he hadn't even told me. When he came out of the bathroom, a towel around his waist, I was sitting on the edge of the bed, the phone in my hand like a weapon. He saw my face and he knew. The color drained from his. "Eliza," he started. "Don't," I snapped, my voice shaking. "Don't you dare start with an excuse." I threw the phone onto the mattress between us. "Who is she, Leo? What is this?" "It's work," he said, his voice low. "You know that." "This isn't work." I was on my feet now, pacing. "This is This is emotional cheating. You're sharing your day with her, your thoughts, your coffee shop recommendations. When was the last time you recommended a coffee shop to me? The accusation was so ridiculous, so petty, that it hung in the air, absurd. But in my mind, it was the ultimate betrayal. It was about the small intimacies, the ones that were supposed to be mine. I expected him to fight back, to yell, to defend himself, to call me crazy. I was prepared for a war. What I got was far worse. He didn't raise his voice. He just stood there, watching me, his expression shifting from shock to a deep, profound weariness. He looked at me as if I were a stranger, a hysterical, irrational stranger who had just broken into his home. I screamed. I cried. I accused him of everything I could think of. I brought up every small, slight, every forgotten anniversary, every moment I had ever felt neglected, and I laid it all at the feet of this digital relationship with Claire. When I finally ran out of breath, my body trembling, my throat raw, I stood there, waiting for the explosion. It never came. He just looked at me, his eyes empty of any emotion I recognized. He walked over to his closet, pulled on a shirt and pants, and didn't say a single word. "Aren't you going to say anything?" I whispered, my anger deflating into a raw, desperate panic. He finally turned to me, and his voice was quiet, so quiet it was terrifying. "What is there to say, Eliza?" he asked. "You've already written the entire script in your head. I don't seem to have a part in it." And then it began. The silence. He didn't leave, he didn't pack a bag, he just shut down. He closed a door inside himself, and I was locked out. The fight I had wanted, the fight I had needed to clear the air, never happened. In its place, a cold, suffocating silence descended on our home. And it was then that I realized my punishment had begun. Living with a ghost is a special kind of hell. Leo was physically present, a warm body in our bed, a figure across the breakfast table. But the man I knew, my Leo, was gone. In his place was a polite, distant stranger who moved through our home with the careful, quiet steps of a guest who didn't want to overstay his welcome. The silence was absolute. It was a living, breathing thing that filled every corner of our brownstone. He would speak when spoken to, but only in short, functional sentences. "Do you need anything from the store?" I'd ask, my voice sounding unnaturally loud in the quiet. "No, thank you. Dinner's ready. Thank you. It looks nice. And Natina do. Thank you." He said, "Thank you for everything." Like I was his housekeeper. The intimacy was gone, replaced by a crushing, formal courtesy. At first, I thought it was a phase, a tactic. He was punishing me for my outburst, and once I'd suffered enough, he'd come back. So I decided to fight the silence with everything I had. I tried seduction. I bought new lingerie, the expensive, lacy kind he used to love. I waited for him one night, posed on the bed like a page from a magazine. He walked into the room, looked at me, and his eyes held no desire. Only a deep, sad exhaustion. "You'll catch a cold, Eliza," he said, before walking into the bathroom and closing the door. I tried jealousy. I started talking about a new, important client I was working with, a man named Mark. I'd laugh at my phone, letting him hear. "Oh, Mark is hilarious," I'd say to the empty room. "He has the most brilliant ideas." Leo would just turn a page in his book, his expression unchanging. He didn't care. He had completely and utterly disengaged. My desperation grew, clawing at my throat. One night, I deliberately let a pot of water boil over on the stove, the hissing and spitting a welcome noise in the oppressive quiet. He didn't flinch. Another evening, I accidentally knocked over a small ceramic bird he'd bought on one of our first trips together. It shattered on the hardwood floor. I waited for him to yell, to show some flicker of emotion, anything. He walked over, got the dustpan and broom from the closet, and swept up the pieces without a single word. He didn't even look at me. It was as if I, and the memory the bird represented, had simply been erased. My internal monologue became a frantic, looping tirade. This wasn't him. This was her, Claire. This calm, detached cruelty, it was a strategy, a sophisticated, European way of psychological warfare. She had taught him this. She had told him to just wait me out, to let me self-destruct. She wanted him to see me as the hysterical, unstable wife, while she remained the calm, rational alternative. I started seeing her influence everywhere. The new books on his nightstand were dense historical texts, not the mystery novels he used to love. He started listening to classical music in the evenings, the somber notes of a cello filling the silence that I couldn't. The house became a battleground, a war of attrition. I was launching every weapon. I had passion, anger, jealousy, nostalgia, and he was meeting it with nothing, a void, an impenetrable wall of silence, and I was losing. I was losing my mind, pacing the floors of my beautiful, curated home, which now felt like a pristine, soundproof prison. And the only sound I could hear was the frantic beating of my own heart. The end came on a Sunday. It had been 3 weeks, 21 days of hollow courtesies and crushing silence. I was a wreck. I couldn't work. I couldn't sleep. I spent my days replaying every moment, every conversation, trying to pinpoint the exact second I had lost him. He found me in the kitchen, staring out the window at the rain-slicked street. He didn't startle me. I felt his presence before I heard him. He pulled out a chair at the small kitchen table, our table, where we'd planned our future, and sat down. I turned, my heart hammering against my ribs. This was it, the breaking of the ceasefire. "Eliza," he said, and his voice was different. It wasn't angry, it wasn't cold. It was just final. "We can't go on like this." A wild, desperate hope surged through me. He was right. We couldn't. This was his white flag. He was ready to talk, to fix this. "I know, Leo," I said, my voice thick with relief. "I know. I'm sorry. I overreacted. We can go back. We can fix it." He looked down at his hands resting on the table. He shook his head slowly. "No," he said softly. "We can't. There is no us to go back to." The air left my lungs. "What are you talking about?" I whispered. He finally looked up at me, and his eyes were clear. The exhaustion was gone, replaced by a quiet, devastating resolve. "I'm talking about the last 3 weeks. But not just that. I'm talking about the last year. Maybe longer." He continued, his voice steady, each word a carefully placed stone building a wall between us forever. "I have spent years, Eliza, living inside the life you designed. I walked on eggshells, careful not to disrupt your vision of who I should be, of who we should be. I let you curate me, just like one of your design projects. And I went along with it because I loved you, and it was easier than fighting." He paused, taking a breath. "But that night, when you looked at my phone, when you accused me of all of that, I didn't see my wife. I saw a stranger who was terrified of anything she couldn't control. And I realized I couldn't breathe anymore." End course. My mind was reeling. This wasn't about Claire. This was about me? "This is her," I choked out. "She put these ideas in your head. She's turned you against me." "No," he said, and for the first time, a flicker of anger showed in his eyes. "She did the one thing you haven't done in years. She listened. She talked to me about my work, my ideas, as an equal. She gave me space to be myself. She offered me peace, Eliza, peace." The word was a death sentence. "Your rage, your jealousy, it didn't push me away," he said, his voice dropping again. "It just confirmed that I had been gone for a long time already. And yes, it pushed me towards her. It pushed me towards someone who didn't see me as a possession to be guarded." He stood up. "I'm going to pack a few things. I'll stay at a hotel until I can find a place." My entire world tilted on its axis. This couldn't be happening. This was a nightmare. I had to ask. The question was poison, but I had to drink it. "Do you love her?" He didn't answer right away. He just looked at me, and in his gaze, I saw not hatred, but a deep, sorrowful pity. And that was so much worse. He walked to the door of the kitchen, and just before he left, he stopped and looked back. "Yes," he said. And then he was gone, leaving me alone in the kitchen. The silence he left behind was a different kind. It wasn't a punishment anymore. It was an answer. It was the sound of my perfect world, my beautiful, curated masterpiece, being shattered into a million irreparable pieces. It's been a year. The divorce was finalized 6 months ago, a quiet, clinical affair conducted through lawyers. He was, as always, polite. He gave me the house, the brownstone I had poured my soul into. It was a generous settlement, a parting gift. Or maybe he just didn't want any part of the life we had built. He didn't want the memories. I still live here. The silence is a permanent resident now. Sometimes I walk through the rooms and I can still see him reading in his favorite armchair, laughing at something on TV. They are ghosts, echoes of a life that feels like it belonged to someone else. I do the one thing I know I shouldn't. I look at their social media. Claire's profile is private, of course. She's too smart for that, but Leo's is open. He never cared much for it before, but now he posts. There are pictures of them hiking in Colorado, the mountains vast and real behind them. There's a picture of them in Paris, standing in front of the Musée d'Orsay, her head resting on his shoulder. There's one of them in a small, bright apartment filled with books and plants, their hands clasped together on a table. He looks happy, genuinely, peacefully happy. A kind of happy I don't recognize. A kind of happy I now realize I never gave him. 3 weeks ago, he posted a photo. It was a close-up of Claire's hand resting in his. On her finger was a simple, elegant ring with a sapphire stone. The caption was short. A new exhibit, a permanent collection. My beginning. The comments were a flood of congratulations and hearts. Everyone saw a beautiful love story. A tale of two brilliant minds finding each other. They saw romance. They don't see the truth. They don't see the calculated, methodical way she dismantled my life. She saw what I had, she coveted it, and she played the long game. She presented herself as a calm harbor in a storm she helped create. She was a predator disguised in intellectualism and quiet confidence. She didn't win him with passion. She won him with strategy. And Leo, he was a coward. Too weak to fight for us, too easily swayed by the promise of something new and uncomplicated. He didn't want a partner, he wanted an escape. I sit here sometimes, in my quiet, perfect house, and I look at the photos of them. I see his new smile, his new life, his new future. And I feel a bitter, burning rage. But underneath it all, there's a cold, hard stone of knowledge that I will carry with me forever. She can have the man who hikes in mountains and posts smiling pictures on the internet, the calm, resolved man who found his peace. But she will never have the man I knew, the one whose rhythms I had memorized, whose thoughts I could predict, whose entire world once fit so neatly in the palm of my hand. She may have his future, but she will never have his past. She will never have the Leo I built. In the end, she's just in love with a ghost I left behind. And maybe that is the most perfect punishment of all.